Welcome, everybody. My name is Desiree McIver. Here's Richard Cloutier.
Miigwech, thank you so very much. Lost key alert. If you lost your keys, I'm thinking they're house keys, but I don't necessarily see, and it's got a Neelan Spartans on it. So if you've lost your keys, come on up and we'll get you those keys back. They'll be at the front. Had it been a new car, there would have been a door prize later this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much, and Desiree Miigwech, thank you so very much for the very kind introduction, because as I always say, and in case, how many people have been here before? So we have a lot of new folks here, so welcome. I do believe that for a variety of reasons, this is the most important dialogue during any election, but particularly a provincial election. The policies that can be adopted here can change lives. And I think that's why it's so very important for those who are joining us online, welcome. For those here, what these four candidates have to say on behalf of their parties is so very important. With that in mind, decorum, respect, tolerance, we all stand for this. Sometimes in the heat of the moment we can get excited about that, and I understand that completely. Applause goes a long ways. The opposite of that makes me think, no, that's not cool. So I encourage the dialogue, and we're going to have lots of opportunity for that dialogue a little bit later on, an opportunity not for you to make speeches, but to ask direct questions of the candidates. And by the way, I'm pretty good at kind of knowing if you're going on. There's a little bit later on, we're going to ask the candidates to do the paddles and the yes, no to some very direct questions. I've always said that if you're not sure, you can kind of go yes, no, or put them upside down, but you'll be the judge of whether or not you get a definitive answer or not. The first round, though, in a moment after we have the openings, we're going to have a good chunk of time, 15 minutes, to discuss some of the key issues here. Each candidate at that point will get 2 minutes. We'll have time for rebuttal, but we'll also have time for respectful dialogue between the candidates. But for now, we want to open the debate, and we're going to go from my far right, your far left, and we're going to go through for 2 minutes. These are opening remarks, just to say hello to you and how glad the candidates are here to be with you. So without further ado, this is Duguid Lamont. He is with us from the Liberal Party of Manitoba.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Look, this is this is one of the most important issues that we face in Manitoba. For a very long time, we've had not just child poverty, but child poverty, of course, is family poverty, and it's some of the deepest poverty anywhere in Canada. So it requires urgent action. One of the things I once heard is that poverty is the greatest censor, that there's a real, there's shame around poverty. It's imposed shame, that people historically have treated the idea that if somebody is living in poverty, it's their fault, and that it needs to be corrected somehow. And I think that's how our systems have been built. Imposed shame. When really what we need to be doing is focusing on serving people, making sure that if somebody lifting people out of poverty. We do have a plan. We put forward our entire platform last week. One of the things we'd like to see is to change the entire mandate of social assistance to be lifting people out of poverty, to making sure that people have a dignified wage and a dignified income, and also making sure that we're giving people work and training opportunities, recognizing all the reasons why people have lived in poverty. But the other is that in Manitoba, in particular, we have what I consider to be forced poverty, that people have been driven into poverty by the policies of previous governments. and that's something that has to change. So it is a very important election because this is an opportunity to make change for the better. Thank you.
For the New Democratic Party, Nahani Fontaine. It's 90-second openings, by the way.
First and foremost, I want to say miigwech to Make Poverty History for organizing tonight's very important and critical discussion. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge all of the folks that are on the front lines of doing anti-poverty work. I want to acknowledge those folks that are doing the research, the folks that are on the front lines, the folks that are in our social justice organizations. More often than not, this work is done and led by women. And so I want to acknowledge the women that are doing this work and that are doing it from a place of understanding that when we tackle poverty, when we lift families out of poverty, when we lift women out of poverty, we are making transformative change, not only in the lives of those particular individuals, but in the lives of their children and future generations. That is critical work. And this election is a very, very important election. Manitobans have a very important decision to make on October 3rd, or at the advance vote from 23rd to the 29th, on who we're going to elect. And I would submit to folks, I would submit to Manitobans that we have to do better. We have to elect a government that truly cares, that will govern with compassion, that governs with a comprehensive and robust plan to be anti-poverty here in Manitoba. Miigwech.
Thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just arriving, there's a few seats over here at the front of the house. We won't, point at you and say, "Why are you late?" Because that's just the way we roll. So welcome. This is Janine Gibson with the Green Party of Manitoba.
Hello, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I certainly feel in my heart the words that my colleague has just shared. Coming from a place where I was unhoused at 17, and had it not been for the MINCOME program, the guaranteed income program that allowed me to quit my 2 waitressing jobs and go and finish high school, I doubt my children would be as happy and healthy as they are today, nor would I be here able to be of service to a community that I'm so proud to be part of, even though the tragedy of the poverty in Winnipeg and Manitoba is heartrending. I also say thank you so much to the organizers of this event. These are key issues that need to be addressed. The addressing of poverty issues through what our policies with the Green Party support is a basic income guarantee, very similar. When I look at the 10 top demands for action, they are all foundational Green Party values, because not only do we say as part of the biology we need to have compassion for Turtle Island, our mother this earth, we also need to have much greater compassion for each other. And a Green MLA will be the conscientious and outspoken, hopefully dialogue promoter between the divisiveness that's being demonstrated by the dominant parties. So thank you so much for your attendance here. Miigwech. My heart is full.
For the Progressive Conservatives, here's Rick Schoen.
Well, thanks everyone for being here tonight. This is truly something that is very dear to my heart as well. From having parents growing up in poverty, growing up as a kid not having a lot of money, living in my self-subsidized housing until I could get my feet and get off 3 jobs as well. It's an area dear to my heart. When I was younger, I was sponsored to go to Bangladesh and saw a level of poverty there that I've never seen before. And that changed me as a person. And when I came back to Canada, I was a changed person. I spend a lot of time now working and being downtown. I see poverty, addictions, and mental health issues every single day where my office is. And I've spent the last 6 to 7 years specifically dealing with this issue and trying to figure out how to help people. I've been so fortunate as well to experience some of the compassion of those who work in the industry I say, who work in the area. I always thought I was a compassionate person, but we have a lot to learn. We have a lot more to listen, and there's no question that we need to do better. We have made progress, there is good things to talk about, but we're not there, and there is much more to do.
Thank you so very much. So candidates, you got that kind of out of your system already? You're feeling good? All right. I've had 5 cups of coffee today, so just be warned. No, I'm kidding. These are, and this is the long question part, requires Manitobans to have access to low rental housing. The private market in this area is increasingly unaffordable to people experiencing poverty and homelessness. Households in the lowest income part of this spend an average of 68% households are on the wait list for a social housing unit, 6,000. The Right to Housing Coalition and the Manitoba Nonprofit Housing Association are calling on parties for low rent housing. Here's the question, and we'll begin with Nahani Fontaine of the NDP. 2 minutes. Will your party create new social housing and protect the existing social housing supply? If so, how will you do this and when you will do this? 2 minutes, Nahani Fontaine.
I think that I would submit to everybody in the room here that we can all agree that one of the issues that we are facing and that we've seen grown exponentially is our unsheltered relatives. All of us have seen our unsheltered relatives sleeping in bus benches in -40 weather. That is unacceptable. And, even in St. John's, we've had an increase of our unsheltered relatives that have been moving in for safety, looking for safety in our parks. This is actually one of the most critical issues that we're dealing with right now, and it only grew exponentially because the PCs, starting in 2016 and up until just very recently, continuously sold off social housing. And they sold off social housing because they wanted to get out of the business of doing government. They want to do government on the cheap. They don't want to take care of Manitobans. There are a segment of the population that they simply don't care about. And so we've seen a rise exponentially of our unsheltered relatives. And so if we are lucky enough to win government, we are committed to strengthening rent control by enacting legislation to prevent landlords from applying unnecessary rent increases. We will establish a ministerial approval process to provide oversight over non-profit housing so that we don't get in a situation like what we saw at Lyons Place. I know that everybody saw that, and the stress and the heartbreaking stress that people were under, those citizens were under, is unacceptable. We will introduce a $700 tax credit to make rent more affordable. We will maintain our social housing. We will establish more social and affordable housing for Manitobans. And more importantly, we will work with the federal government. This is an all-hands-on-board initiative.
Thank you so very much. Janine Gibson, the Greens. Ms. Gibson?
Yes, Green MLAs will work towards supporting the needed 10,000 units so that those on social housing don't have to wait so long. Transparency in waiting lists, not only in housing, but for our healthcare. There needs to be greater transparency in government so that officials can be held accountable, and the decimation that has happened in our government bureaucracy can be filled so that we have positions like housing support support workers. These are very important in assisting that people are able to be matched with the appropriate housing. So, perhaps we could sell green bonds so that these new 10,000 units are produced to the kind of building codes that will help us move to a carbon neutral culture. We also need the housing support workers to help fit the right people into the right housing situations. We also need to stop the workarounds through legislation where landlords are able to raise the rent and evict folks by getting special compensation to raise the rents higher than they're allowed. So these kinds of very important policies are part of what the Green Party wants to work towards. The Right to Housing Coalition, we totally support their calls to action. We think not only in housing do we have to address this lack of appropriate housing, but we need to make sure that women and children are housed in emergency situations when they're subject to domestic violence. There needs to be adequate housing there, and not just located in the large urban centers. Many of us do much better on the land. I've been fortunate enough to spend most of my life living on the land, and this is what we need, is dispersed throughout all areas of Manitoba, not just in the city. So a green MLA and green MLAs will work towards the transparency and the support that these changes are enacted. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I see Rick Schoen, the NDP, took some shots at you, so you have 2 minutes now. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, there are some really good things that I'm hearing there, but not all of it rings true. And, one thing that I thought about when I was hearing that is I got this perfect example of a building that was finished in 2016, right as the NDP finished their last term. It's called Center Village, and I've literally looked at it for the last 7 years of a perfect building that could have been designed better to house people, but yet now we cannot use that building and it is worthless.
Well, you should thank the
Still got about a minute, but you're
Sorry, I got 2 minutes. Okay,
Yeah, I got 2 minutes.
So one of the things that we need to look back at 2016, just a little bit of glimpse in time. In 2016, we were left with $500 million of social housing that was not maintained. The maintenance was deferred. That mess had to be cleaned up. Over $296 million was cleaned up since 2016. I've actually spoken to a lot of the tradespeople who've gone into those buildings, and many of those buildings were not salvageable. So we can talk about selling off the housing, but at the end of the day, a place like Center Village, when it was worth $3.7 million to buy, and now it's worth $1 million, there's a similar building right behind the area that's going to be actually $10 million to build. You can't replace these things for the same amount. So we've had to spend a lot of time trying to refurbish, maintain, and rebuild all of these places. And we do have plans. We have a plan in motion. We have a homeless strategy right now. It's $126 million to shift efforts from managing homeless to ending homeless, like truly ending homeless. And it was launched earlier than planned because of the urgency of homelessness. And it takes a whole government approach to do this.
Thank you so very much. Douglas Lamont with the Liberals.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is an absolutely critical area. In our platform, we committed to overhauling the rental tenancies branch, which of course has been a rubber stamp, not just a rubber stamp when it comes to evicting people, rent evictions, but the legislation as it stands right now. I had a constituent who she's a mom with 3 kids, trying to find an apartment for $1,600, and rent control doesn't apply. So that all of a sudden she was charged an extra $400 a month, and there was no avenue for appeal. We'll bring in legislation to make sure that it'll require a minister to sign off on the sale of places like Lions Place. And we've committed to building 10,000 units in a variety of ways. Some of that would be renovations. There are actually a lot of spaces in Manitoba that could be renovated and turned into living quarters, but it needs to be with supports as well. We've also committed to a same-day housing strategy. We can't do it overnight, but that's what we need to aim for. Currently, in Manitoba, when you're homeless, you have to be chronically homeless for 6 months to be able to be housed. And that can be a very, very cold 6 months. And that's the PC government policy. It doesn't make any sense. So we need to be making sure that we're housing people immediately and providing them with the supports, because that is not just the humane thing to do, but there's a saying that, the worse you treat people, the more it costs you. And the inverse is also true. The better you treat people, the less it's going to cost you. We have homeless people sleeping, or who end up in ERs in the back of police cars, who are costing huge amounts of money, and they're not actually getting the care they need. So we need to make sure that they're supported in housing, which is lower cost and more humane. And is in our platform to make sure that happens. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Please, Nahani, respond to that. You get 30 seconds, but I also would like to know if there is room for the private sector in all this, because to me, the need is so great. You need so many entities to be involved in this. So as you look at those 10,000 new social housing units, is it all government built? Is it all not-for-profit built? Or is there a role for the private sector in this?
Well, I think I'd like to take my 30 seconds to correct the record of Rick Sean, who indicates that maintenance hasn't been upkept with social housing. It's really important to understand that in 2016, the NDP budgeted $100 million for maintenance of social housing. And when the PCs came into power, they slashed that budget to less than $30 million. It is impossible to upkeep all of our social housing on a shoestring budget. And if there's anything that I can say about the PCs is that they've tried to do government on the cheap, and there are consequences to that. And one of the consequences is that we do not have social housing stocks here in Manitoba.
Okay, Rick Sean, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I would just say quickly that, we agree, you can't do housing on the cheap. However, in 2016, $100 million, it's far too late. Anyone knows that if you let something pile up for so long, rather than dealing with it, that it becomes this massive problem, and you just can't deal with it. You can't deal with it in short order. And quickly on that note of partnerships, yeah, of course, you can't do housing on the cheap. Today, things cost way more than they did in 2016, and I think we could look towards partnerships to better, build social housing in Manitoba.
Janine, just in a moment here, we do have a few minutes here, but I just
Social enterprise.
Hang on, just wanted to, Nahani, just on the 10,000 units, is that something that the NDP commits to doing?
We commit to social housing, to building more social and affordable housing. What the numbers look like at right this moment, I'm not sure, but
Okay.
we certainly commit to more social and affordable housing so that our relatives are not sleeping in bus benches. And there's good examples out there. Look at Mama Way. Mama Way partnered with the feds, and they have the tiny homes village right now. And they were able to get 22 unsheltered relatives into their own little homes. We're prepared to work in partnership with the feds, with the city, with all levels of government to ensure that Manitobans' basic human rights of access to housing is adhered to.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, housing is a basic human right, and the Green Party believes that we could support more social enterprise to ensure there's more geothermal installed so that people are not spending so much on heating in this very cold climate. So social enterprise is a way where we can leverage funds to train the very people who need the housing to have the skills to maintain it. So it's not all government, it's community, but relying on the private sector, they tend not to step up. So I'm more interested, and the Green Party's more interested, in supporting Crown corporations to ensure that communities have what they need. Thank you.
We do see a role for the private sector, but not in terms of financing, but simply in terms of the fact that there is private space out there that we can take advantage of. The one thing I do have to say that both the PCs and the NDP sold off social housing. They both sold off, and there have been billions and billions of dollars, at least $1 billion in maintenance, because Manitoba Housing is one of the worst landlords in the province. And I have to deal with folks, and I've had to deal with folks in my constituency who've been struggling for years for things to improve. So we do need that housing. Thank you, and I will finish up right there. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Yeah, no, it's quite interesting. I've spent some time going out with various organizations, and you hear the issues regarding Manitoba housing, and you know how. And I remember having a conversation with somebody at one of the housing complex who said, "I was sentenced here, and I'm just trying to get out." And you know, that just kind of it's still the image in my mind here, and that whatever we can do to kind of move the needle, it's up to all of us to do that. Question number 2 goes to hungry and basic needs, and we're going to start with Janine Gibson and go that way, and it'll be 2 minutes, and again 30-second rebuttals. Here's kind of the prelude, and then I'll get to the question. People on low incomes are hungry and can't afford high food prices. Manitoba is the only province with over 10% food inflation. Food bank use at Harvest Manitoba has doubled since 2019. Most food bank users are on EIA, or low wage earners. The Manitoba Assistance Act states that the provincial government provides things and services that are essential to health and well-being. However, food banks are subsidizing those on EIA. Make Poverty History and Basic Income Manitoba recommend that the province increase the basic needs budget of EIA to the poverty line and create a portable, unconditional benefit for the working poor that eliminates that welfare wall. Here's the question. Will your party commit to this? If not, why not? What are you going to do to ensure the health and well-being of all low-income Manitobans? We begin with Janine Gibson of the Green Party. 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, the Green Party policy has long supported a basic income guarantee, which I believe goes even further than the basic needs benefit, though the basic needs benefit could be an important step to us moving towards that. As I've already spoken, my education was crucial. It was crucial to my continuing that education that I received that kind of income when I was alone at 17 in the city, having been raised in the country and knowing nothing about the city. So I know the lack of supports and the tremendous mental health stress that is contributed to by not having sufficient income. So yes, the Green Party definitely supports a basic needs benefit, and in addition to that, we need to have sufficient free mental health services and addiction support services to complement the healing from the stress that has been caused by intergenerational neglect and the long time that we have not had sufficient social housing to meet the needs of folks, sufficient income supports. The wage now that minimum wage earners get is not enough to live on. We need a livable minimum wage, and we need to separate the wage freeze from the income from people with disabilities receiving income, and their disability benefits should be separated so that they have the disability benefits and they might be able to work and find ways that they could contribute, because there are so many people that have so much to contribute to our society that are excluded. So the Green Party would hold citizen assemblies to find ways to solve these problems together based on the lived experience of the people involved. Thank you so much.
So we believe that no Manitobans should go to bed hungry. And yes, of course, we have to do more. We need to continue to do more. The first thing that we recognize is that we can't control the prices. We all have seen massive increase in prices coming out of the pandemic, food inflation, all kinds of other prices are going up. What we are looking to do here is looking at making life more affordable and making sure that Manitobans have more of their money available to pay for bills, to buy food, to live life, and those kinds of things. You know, we this year alone we've taken 47,000 Manitobans off the tax rolls. by increasing the basic personal tax amount. Average family savings about $5,500 annually under our affordability and relief measures. Speaking about minimum wage, it will go up to on October 1st, it'll go up to $15.30. That is the third increase over the last year. And so I remember looking back past, in the days of former NDP government when I started working as a retail salesperson at $5-6 an hour. We have a long way to go on this too, but the difference now is that we will have a predictable increase based on the level of inflation, which we've never had before. And making that change very quickly over the last couple of years is really important to a lot of Manitobans.
Yeah, thank you very much. Look, when it comes to tax cuts, you actually have to make money to pay taxes. So the tax cuts that the PCs have offered, and even saying it's $5,500 for an average family, that's because all the gains are at the top. When you change the PPE, property taxes, like honestly, there are people who are going to be getting a few pennies a day at the bottom end of the scale, while people at the top are going to be getting thousands of dollars. That's not what we're talking about. It is actually making inequality worse. So we've committed to dignified income supports. We want to change EIA because it hasn't changed in 35 years. There are literally people who are making less now than they were in 1989 because it was rolled back to 1986 levels in 1992, and nothing has changed since then. It's a travesty. The other is, we said we would bring in a provincial guaranteed dignified income for people with disabilities and for people over the age of 60. We would make changes to removing barriers to work and volunteering for people on EIA. But the other is creating a Manitoba Works for Good voluntary, it's not workfare, it's a voluntary jobs program that would provide funds and job subsidies so that people can work. And those are all things that we see as being absolutely critical to lifting people out of poverty and making sure that they're able to pay their bills. We've also, and the one thing we've done is different, we've offered an income tax break, but it's actually designed so that people who make over $300,000 will pay more. So it's about making sure that people at the top pay more and making sure that the people who really need it get what they need, and that's the opposite of what has been happening for the past 7 years, and actually for most of the last 35.
Fontaine.
We're dedicated to providing increased supports for individuals on EIA because I know that everyone in the room has seen that folks are struggling, Manitobans are struggling, families are struggling, children are going to bed hungry, which, it's interesting that Rick is saying that no child should go hungry when his colleague, Jane Teitzma, indicated that he doesn't want to feed children. When we talked and we really pushed the PCs to have a universal nutrition program at schools. And so we've committed to having a universal nutrition program at schools to ensure that children have breakfast and lunch and snacks at school. I remember I went to Holy Cross Church, and that breakfast that school gave every morning was sometimes the only food that I had on that day. And that was 40 years ago, 45 years ago. I've never forgotten that kindness and how it helped me to go to school and how it helped my mom. And so we're committed to this universal nutrition program for schools so that nobody goes hungry. We're also committed to increasing the prenatal benefit so that folks, Manitobans who are pregnant, can help with the nutrition that they need, but they can also use those dollars to prepare for their baby coming home. I used that with the birth of when I was pregnant with my second son. I was still a student. That money, and I think it was like $80 back then, that helped me. I used that money for when my son was coming home. We are committed to ensuring that we're lifting people out of poverty and that we're giving people dignity so that we can have a province that we're proud of and that people can thrive and children can thrive as well.
Okay, use your paddles for this, if you please. Pick up your paddles on this because I do want to re-ask the question. Make Poverty History and Basic Income Manitoba recommends that the province increase the basic needs budget of EIA to the poverty line and create a portable unconditional benefit for the working poor that eliminates the welfare wall. Are your parties committing to this? Yes or no? Hold up your paddles. Rick Schoen, why not? Use the microphone.
So we, first of all, do recognize that EIA needs to evolve. It's a, we need to evolve by using tools to assess how everybody gets the income. So these types of tools would allow us to individualize supportive plans tailored to each person's complex needs.
Okay. Now, Hani Fontaine, you put no? Why?
We are committed to supporting folks that are on EIA. What does that look like right now? Right now, our commitments are a universal meal program for children. It's supporting individuals with mental health and addiction services. It's supporting folks to access more affordable social housing. The reality is that we're not going to be able to have a full understanding of what's going on and what the PCs have done in the last 7 years once we get in government and we're able to assess and see what's going on in EIA. But we are absolutely committed to supporting folks on EIA.
Okay. Janine, you said no, correct?
We said yes.
Yes, okay.
It's an important step towards a basic income
So
guarantee.
you're yes, okay. Dougal, you said yes as well or no?
Yes, I said yes.
Okay. Now, Hani is saying wait, and I understand that because you have to look at the books before you can make that commitment. What do you believe, and draw on this, because we had Josh Brandon on yesterday, and he said, you know what, a lot of people in poverty were a whole lot better off during the pandemic. And that struck with listeners. It was like, really? Yeah, because there was money invested in them. And then that was taken away. So you're kind of the veteran on this panel. You've seen all this. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you've been at this for a while. What's wrong with the other positions here?
Well, look, I'll say one of the issues is that the NDP and the PCs have both decided to keep the PC budget. That is one of the, and that means there will be no new budget for months. The only way you can bring in new programs in Manitoba is to pass a budget, which is why we're saying that has to happen. And we've also said that we have to repeal the property tax rebates because they don't make any sense. We're borrowing $453 million this year that we don't have to send checks out of province. And we've said we can't do that because it's not fiscally responsible and that we need to pay. But this needs to be a priority because it'll reduce costs in the long run. Thank you.
Okay. Now, Ani Fontaine is saying it is a priority. They want to see the books first. Janine Gibson, is that disingenuous by the NDP on this, in your view? Or is that, no, it's a sage answer because they may just form government and you have to be cautious at these types of forums?
There has just been insufficient transparency and accountability in both the previous NDP government and the current PC government. So that's why I think we need to have more collegial interaction and not this blaming of each other. You did it, you're worse than we are, we're worse, let's have, the problems are so serious. We need to come to the table together and work together in a more collegial, compassionate manner.
Sean, you want the last 30 seconds, or is that the mic drop moment?
No, well, I would definitely agree with what you just said because I'm not a person thrown off a little bit here by the negative atmosphere and not working together. As a member wanting to come into this team, I will be certainly somebody who listens and works together with people. I just want to say one thing really quickly on the food. Nani, you make it sound like it's a heartless thing. It's not. We are doing a food program. What we're not agreeing to is a universal program. We need to look at that. Yes, we can do better on that as well, but we don't need to provide food for every single child in every single public school.
Moving moving on to question 3, poverty and systems change. We're going to go Rick